Warm welcome. Thank you. Thank you everyone for being here this morning. Again, happy spring equinox. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Hope yours is off to a great start so far. Can I get a thumbs up? Everyone's seeing my screen all right? No issues there? Perfect. Awesome. Well, yeah, again, thank you so much for your time and attention this morning. I'm going to give a quick little teach back, but also talk a little bit specifically about the project that I use the teach back, the tools around. So specifically, the focus of my teach back today is all about identifying stakeholders and gathering their feedback on a major project or agency goal. We'll walk briefly through the different types of stakeholders and the systems mapping technique that I use for my project. I'll share more, again, as I said, about my project as well to provide helpful context about how I use that systems mapping tool. Then we'll pivot to the how. Once you've identified your stakeholders, how do you go about eliciting their feedback in a meaningful and efficient way? I'll share some example questions that I use with my leaders and team of consultants and how those questions help shape the variety of focus group sessions that we hosted early last year. And then I'll close out by sharing some of the personal reflections about engaging voices from your customers, partners, allies, and I'll highlight a few project next steps that my team and I are currently working on. So before we dive in, let's first take a moment and remind ourselves of why we'd want to engage a variety of folks early on in a project or a major change initiative. If we take a step back, we need to realize that we want someone to do something about a particular problem. And there are consequences whenever we don't take the needs or the concerns of others seriously, and the impact that those consequences may have on those individuals. So if there's any sort of key thing that I want you to take away from this is that it's so important to not wait until the end of a project to think about stakeholders. For all of these reasons, by engaging stakeholders, especially early on in your effort, it helps you understand your current state, especially when you're trying to think about changing some part of a process or some part of your agency that involves a lot of different people. It also puts more ideas on the table and includes a variety of different perspectives from all the sectors and elements of your community. From a planning standpoint, it certainly also saves you from being blindsided by concerns you may not have been aware of if you had waited till later on in the project to engage your stakeholder base. Related to that, it strengthens your position by being able to engage stakeholders early on and get that information. If there are questions later on from people about, oh, well, why did you ask this? Or why did you go this direction? You have that data from the users, from your community to provide context and support that. It also increases the credibility of your work, increases the chances of success for whatever change effort you're trying to tackle. And ultimately, it's a really great way to gain buy-in and support from all the folks who may or may not be otherwise engaged in your processes on a regular basis. And by and large, it's fair, it's equitable to everyone. So fundamentally, at the heart of stakeholder engagement is inclusion and equity. So just wanted to call that out briefly. So I just want to give, again, some quick context around my engagement work and tell you about one of the agencies in my division that was sort of the core component of this project. So in 2007, the Education Research and Data Center, ERDC, was created within Washington's Office of Financial Management. You'll notice just a few kind of highlights from our statute, which requires us to focus at a minimum on making data available to education agencies. I saw someone from SBCTC in the room, other institutions, legislature, providing a variety of analysis and data needs to ensure that the interests of the education and fiscal committees of the legislature are served. But we do a lot more than that. We consume and organize data. We produce research and research reports as required by state and federal law. And we provide resources, things like data dictionaries and our handbook to support the use of our data whenever folks need it for research purposes. So I'm not technically an ERDC employee. I am within the forecasting and research systems team, this little branch of our forecasting and research division here circled in purple. But my team, the systems team, supports the longitudinal data warehouse or data environment that OFM's Education and Research and Data Center uses. And so more specifically, that data warehouse is one of the most comprehensive longitudinal data systems, not only in our state, but also in our country. And so this visual kind of gives you a sense of the sort of primary data sources that live within our P20W preschool to grade 20 to workforce data warehouse. And so we have to ensure that this data environment is one of the most and stays the most comprehensive systems in the country. And it's important for us to make sure that this environment meets the needs of staff and customers now and in the future. And so from a context standpoint, we went about undergoing a data system study of this P20W data environment back between late 2022 and into early 2023. And so these were the specific questions we were hoping to tackle through that data system study. So are we using the ideal processes to take in all of those data sources from our multiple providers? Are we using the right tools to manage the movement of that data within our various environments? Do we have the right architecture in place from a structural standpoint to meet the needs of those customers and the variety of customers? And are we using the right tools from a quality profiling standpoint? Are there ways that we can become more efficient? And so this was sort of the focus of the project in which I used the stakeholder mapping technique. So here I am as the project manager, tasked with starting to think about who to engage in this data system study, trying to get answers to all of those questions on the previous slide. And let me tell you, I felt like this guy hanging out in a ball pit. It can feel so daunting, to sort of start thinking about who do we need to talk to in order to really understand the ideal future state of our data environment. And so I want to just sort of acknowledge that can feel very daunting. And also just wanted to open up the floor to see if there are any sort of specific stakeholder terms that you've come across in your work when you think of certain terms and different types of roles that you or your agency may interact with. What sort of terms come to mind for you? And feel free to float those in the chat. And we'll take just a quick moment to see. I'm going to go ahead and advance my slide because I wanted to share there's no right answer. There's a lot of different terms, and I hope you can see the slide now. Just from my own efforts in this project, there was a variety of different terms that I came across in trying to think about who is what in relation to this project. I'm going to take a quick peek in the chat and see how we're doing. Interested parties, nice. Impacted groups, process owners, okay. Nice. Partner engagement, collaborators, technical owners, executive sponsors, key players, yes. Yes, excellent. Yeah, vendors, yeah, great one, Ava. Constituents, absolutely. Lots of great ideas for different terms to use. I think anyone going about this type of exercise, I think, like I said, there's a lot of different ways to, identify who plays what role within the context of your project and change goal. I think the thing to keep in mind is trying to think about roles being mutually exclusive, although in some ways, like some stakeholders may have a few different roles, right? So I often talk with my coworkers about the different hats we wear, right? And so I think that perspective is really important to also take whenever you're thinking about stakeholders. Like, one person may have a few different roles involved in your project and change goal. So trying to think about how to unpack that and how to get feedback from those individuals based on all of those hats that they wear. Great. Thanks for entertaining my prompt in the Zoom chat. So let's talk mapping, y'all. We talked a little bit about the different kinds of stakeholder roles, the terms, lots of great ideas in the chat. I'm going to share with you the different roles that I used whenever I did my systems mapping technique. And again, just as a call out that I did not make this, this tool. I actually was able to test this out with my black belt instructor, Wendy Fraser. I don't know if anyone else has been fortunate to know Wendy and receive her training, but she's fantastic. And we actually did this exercise as a group during our black belt get together. Gosh, I think it was 2022. And so you have these resources. They are posted already on the Results Washington website, excuse me. So I'm just going to walk through. Thank you, Talia. I see you got those in the chat. So what I'm going to do is just sort of walk through the high level steps of what you would need to do to map out your system of stakeholders. But feel free to follow along in the handouts as well. They're totally detailed. I'm just giving you the helicopter view per se. But whenever you're starting this exercise, the first thing is to write down whatever your change goal or your project objective is. And then I did this, like I said, in person with a giant sticky note easel paper. And I used circles to map out all the stakeholders who were impacted by or interact with our P20W data system, for example. And using the handout and the different sort of definitions of the stakeholder roles, I figured out which role each of those folks played. And so I also used different line types to illustrate the quality of the relationship with each stakeholder. And you'll see the little visual under there about the different types of lines and what they mean. So a solid line is strong relationship, dotted is weak, broken relationship that may need repair. And then the arrows would indicate if it's a one-way relationship between your data system and that stakeholder, for example, or a two-way relationship. And so this is what mine looked like. And again, this was something that I did personally as a solo exercise at the Black Belt Get Together. So I did have, some support from my fellow lean and continuous improvement nerds to talk through, how I mapped these things out. I also walked through this map with my leadership team, my steering committee, who was involved in the data system study as well. And we sort of use this as the basis for our future stakeholder engagement efforts, which I'll dive into here in just a second. I do also just want to offer that you don't have to do this by hand. I'm definitely I'm one of those crafty type of people, and I like that tactile experience, if you will. But this could totally be a group exercise, for example, virtually, and you could use PowerPoint or just a simple Word document to create shapes for each of those circles, right? And then use your fancy arrows and lines and all that exciting stuff to create an electronic file out of that work. Another thing I would also do, again, is to revisit this systems map with your leadership team or steering committee, whatever term you prefer to call your group involved in your project or change goal initiative, to do some reflection. Thinking about, are there any particular roles that may be missing from this map? Thinking about, did you cover all of those types of stakeholder roles in the handout, or were there some that just didn't quite ring a bell for you? Being able to reflect on an artifact like this with a larger team is certainly helpful, and I think pretty critical, especially early on whenever you're trying to think about how to talk to all of these people and what to talk to them about. Now, during your mapping exercise or after, as part of your reflection time, you can also use this list of questions to help you think about any additional folks you want to engage. Consider what aspect of your project or change goal are they most interested in or influenced by, or have influence over, excuse me. I would also suggest that Excel is your friend. I sort of gravitate towards using spreadsheets or a matrix type of format to not only track these questions and the responses, but also to just to be able to look at that, reference it, especially if you identify any additional folks who you may have missed during that first mapping run. It's good to sort of have everything laid out in almost like a spreadsheet format. And as I mentioned, this is an exercise that can also be done independently. I would, again, recommend, though, collaborating with your steering committee or your leadership to discuss these questions. On to step 2. Once you've identified the folks to potentially engage, you can also use those interest and influence questions to identify specific things you want to ask them so that their feedback can be incorporated in your project or change initiative from the very beginning. So take time to think about your project focus, change goal, and what information those folks can provide you based on the answers to these, what I call interest or influence questions. So that insight, thinking about what kind of feedback you need to inform your project and the stakeholders' role and interest and influence, to brainstorm what specific questions you want to ask them in step 3. So as a quick recap, we've talked about trying to figure out who to talk to, figuring out what sort of information they could provide you, and then thinking about what questions you want to ask them. That is the focus of step 3 and into step 4. So step 4 is really focused on identifying the format of how you want to ask those questions. Do you want to have one-on-ones? Do you want to have small groups? Do you want to host it as an in-person, virtual, or hybrid? Do you want to record these feedback sessions? And if so, what sort of protocol do you need to abide by based on your agency's rules and guidelines? There's a lot of pros and cons to deal with, not only from a workload standpoint for you and your team, but also for your participants. So again, I think it's really important to utilize the insight of your leadership, your steering committee, to also help figure out the right level of involvement and the right level of engagement, of how to gather based on those stakeholders and what would be sort of the ideal. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about the discovery sessions that I hosted with support from the contracting team that we hired to actually conduct the data system study. So as project manager for the data system study, I coordinated a series of 25 discovery sessions, is what we called them, essentially focus groups, so that our team of consultants doing the study could ask critical questions about their experiences and challenges of working with our data system. And so, as the slide alludes to, we talked with a lot of different people, a lot of different stakeholders touch or interact with our data system. So we talked with everyone from state government agencies on that pretty map slide I shared earlier, to internal staff and funding partners, to researchers from community organizations and internally who utilize our data for meaningful research purposes. And so depending on their role, we hosted a variety of one-on-one and small group sessions. We received a lot of positive feedback and appreciation for incorporating their voice into the study efforts. And so each session was anywhere between 30 and 60 minutes. And one thing that all the participants mentioned was their appreciation for emailing the guide of questions and context within 24 hours of their scheduled session. So I think that speaks very highly of, you as a project manager are doing a lot yourself to help manage this work. It's just as important to set your stakeholders up for success and make sure they're clear on expectations for what kind of feedback you're hoping to gather. Yes, Anita, change management in action. And so I just wanted to quickly share some of the feedback we were able to gather from our discovery sessions from our stakeholders. So again, this is sort of all relating to our P20W data environment. Specifically, I'm showing the bright spots. From talking with our stakeholders, many of them echoed support and satisfaction with the quality of support that they get from ERDC. The thing that I was very excited to hear about was the sort of ripple effects from the business process improvements that I instituted a few years ago. Those, still have lasting impact, which is great. Also things like building trust, clarifying responsibilities, and leveraging our vendors to support our systems. Excuse me. We also identified some critical areas of improvement based on those discovery sessions involving our stakeholders. So these are absolutely things we are continuing to work on beyond the data system study. So trying to better communicate the value of ERDC and the products and artifacts that we create, improving our processes continually from a manual entry perspective and staffing resource perspective as well. And again, thinking about that infrastructure, are there ways that we are not potentially aware of from a modernization standpoint? What are some opportunities, both short-term and long-term, that we can think about improving our data environment to meet those needs of our customers? And through the stakeholder engagement work, we also use that feedback to prepare a vision statement, not only about the state, but also, again, about our system and how this needs to remain one of the most comprehensive longitudinal systems in our country and continually meet the needs of our data consumers now and in the future. We also used the stakeholder feedback to identify some strategic goals that we were able to successfully meet through that study. And ultimately, all of these conversations with our stakeholders informed the target state architecture, the sort of schematics of what our ideal data environment could look like compared to what it looks like currently. The stakeholder feedback also helped us identify potential solutions through our consultants' market analysis and thinking about what concrete next phases us as a division need to consider to identify how we can move towards a more modern P20W data environment. Thanks, Beth. Yes, data literacy is super important to me. I could talk all day about that. So appreciate that. So we have had so much opportunity and growth from all of these stakeholder engagement efforts. Like I said, we are on a clear track to planning our cloud strategy based on some of this information. And so just want to echo, it all started with a map and just being thoughtful about how you engage the various roles and entities that connect with your project or goal. So I'll just share a few reflections and then highlight a few project next steps, and then we can pivot to Q&A. First off, you may have noticed I've used the word stakeholder, I've used the word folks, I've used the word allies. It would probably make more sense to start from this at the very beginning of the presentation, but I hope that you understand how important it is to think about how you use the term stakeholder in your organization and in your everyday language, and particularly in whatever this project or change initiative is that you're trying to launch. There are many there's a lot of history to unpack with the word stakeholder. And I think that those kinds of conversations are really important to have with your teams. And so I share in this slide, I share a blog post that talks a little bit about the controversy and the discomfort with that word stakeholder. And so I encourage you to read and reflect and have conversations about it with your team. I also, again, hope that one of the things you take away from this is that both you and your project benefit from stakeholder feedback. It takes a lot of time and it's a lot of work, but it should be an ongoing practice, and it's absolutely worth the investment. Stakeholders benefit from engaging in the project, and they appreciate the opportunity to voice their perspective. So just an important takeaway to think about. I also encourage you diversify your strategies for communicating. So I just listed off, a few different types of communication strategies we implemented in the data system study, like a kickoff meeting, those discovery sessions, a feedback form that was always available, summary handouts, presentations and Q&A, and then a dedicated web page, public web page to outline what's going on. Excuse me. And then lastly, Talia and I found a really great resource on stakeholder engagement do's and don'ts. So we just wanted to highlight a few of those as well on the slide, do and don't. And again, there's a full link embedded in the slide where you can go and look at that further. So I mentioned this all happened like last year and like into late 2022. So I'm keeping busy. In assessing the recommendations from our contractors for our data system study, there were some clear short-term improvements that we could make to our current processes. And so we are doing that right now in terms of building data resources, thinking about how to utilize Microsoft 365 to help us build some more internal communications around our data, where it's at in our environment. So we're working on those right now. I'm also excited to say that we were able to obtain funds from the Gates Foundation to support our early planning and design stages. And so we are in the very, very early days of that, thinking about the efforts to plan and design this cloud strategy. In addition to that, we're also trying to start discussing roles. Because if we transition to a cloud strategy, our our systems team also needs to have that skill set, that expertise, because right now we're on-prem. Our infrastructure is on-prem. And so, thinking about not only the staffing side of a cloud strategy, staffing and resources, they kind of go hand in hand. Additionally, I'm providing regular updates through our existing channels of communication with our stakeholders. I need to update the content on our website about our data modernization work. That's on my to-do list. And all the while, we're trying to start thinking about how do we gather additional input from those folks in the discovery sessions to inform what use cases should our cloud strategy be able to meet. And so we're still, like I said, early days, but we could not have gotten this far without leveraging the input from folks like our data users, our legislative folks, the other state government agencies. It is truly valuable and definitely time well spent. All right. Again, thank you very much for your time and your attention. I see that there's a lot of stuff in the chat, so I'm going to get caught up to speed. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Megan. Would you like me to read out any of the questions for you? Happy to do that. Looks like there were a few folks a little while ago. Brett asks, when you were doing your stakeholder mapping, did you have specific criteria for strong, weak relationships, etc.?
That's a great question. I sort of interpret weak as those relationships have existed in relation to this project or change goal for a fair amount of time, but maybe they haven't been like well developed. Maybe there's been, some tension, whatever that looks like. And so that's sort of how I would distinguish a weak relationship from, I can't even remember what the other one was. Brain fart.
Needs repair.
Needs repair. That's the needs repair one. Excuse me. And weak would be like it hasn't been well developed. Yeah, relationships that need repair. I think of it as there's history there, and there's some opportunities to move beyond that history and work for the better. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Um, one community member asked, should you map between the groups?
Ooh. Like, trying to think about how that would look visually. Let's see.
There may be kind of some interconnections between some of the stakeholders that might kind of have some indirect correlations.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would certainly be interesting. I'm trying to think about it like in relation to the data system study. I think that there are certainly some learnings that could come from that, like maybe through that interconnected relationship, there's a specific need or a specific kind of interest or influence that may not exist otherwise, just looking at those groups independently. So absolutely, I think that's great. I think it would be helpful to have that information collected separately from your map, but in a way where you can look at both of them at the same time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And Beth added too, it's great to know the value of those interconnected relationships and the impact that it has on the project.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. I think there was just a couple more questions. I saw that Max asked if the feedback from your tool for measuring is the feedback form your tool for measuring improvement, or is there another tool or process that you used?
The feedback form was more specifically around Well, it was a feedback form that was available throughout the data system study. So for example, at the kickoff meeting, I introduced the feedback form. At the end of every discovery session, and I sat on all discovery sessions except for one of them, I believe, taking notes, didn't record them. And so at the end of every discovery session and in all of those interview guides that we sent pre-session was the feedback form. It was the last slide. So, I think that we used it for both. Like, was there any sort of feedback that the stakeholders would like to provide at any point in their process? And so the questions that I built into the form were general, but we got a few responses. I mean, it wasn't like an active thing that people used. But it certainly was, a resource that some folks did tap, but not all of them.
Awesome. Perfect. One more question. Who facilitated your discovery sessions?
Yes. So we hired a company called Gartner Consulting to actually conduct the data system study. They're a very large firm who kind of specialize in all things data related, dare I say. And so me and two of our leadership within the division, the director of ERDC and my supervisor, the systems lead, we worked with the team to identify what questions to ask at those sessions. And it was actually our consultants actually asking those questions. And I was literally a fly on the wall. I said at the beginning of every session, I am just here to listen and observe. And I'm, if there was like a clarification question, that wasn't specific to feedback, like, if they said something or asked a question about a detail about our warehouse, I did chime in with that. But otherwise, my mouth was shut the whole time. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Megan.
Yeah.
And if anybody has any additional questions, I am sure her virtual door is always open. Feel free to shoot her a message or an email. But it sounds like, your project, Megan, was, right on, and it did a really good job just navigating those intricacies between data management and all the players involved. Sounds like you did a great job managing that. And it's really great, when we can kind of shift our perspective of stakeholders from, oh, just one more person to kind of, inform and involve to how can we
Mhm.
leverage,
Yeah.
their knowledge and skills to help us, be successful. So awesome. Thank you so much for sharing today.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Well, we are pretty on schedule here, just a couple minutes behind. I'd love to introduce Aunna Moss, also with the Office of Financial Management, who's here to share a project about her unit. And how they undertook the effort to obtain customer feedback and to improve their strategy, performance, and value. So, Anna, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Teresa. And can you just confirm if you can see my screen?
Yes, ma'am. Looks great.
Awesome. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Aunna Moss, and I use she, her pronouns, and I am an organization strategy and performance lead consultant with the Washington State Office of Financial Management, or OFM. Really excited to be here with all of you today to share some brief information about a customer feedback initiative within the Organization Strategy and Performance Unit, otherwise known as OSP Unit, at the Washington State Office of Financial Management. So before I get into the initiative itself, I wanted to start by sharing a little bit about the great team that I am a part of. The Organization Strategy and Performance Unit is comprised of 3 consultants, including myself and our director. And I think I saw all my team members in today's audience. So hi, everyone, and please feel free to jump in. Collectively, we have several years of experience working in the public sector, and we hold certifications in various disciplines, including lean, organization change management, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and leadership development. And really, I just want to emphasize that as a team, we're really committed to providing human-centered consulting services and leading with empathy, respect, and flexibility. For today's project share, this is just a quick overview of what I will cover today. So I will start by providing some background information, really discussing what led us to start this customer feedback initiative. Then I'll talk about some of our goals with undertaking this initiative, and then move into specifics about how we gather customer feedback and some of the themes of the feedback that we received. Then talking about outcomes of our initiative, including challenges and successes. And then in closing, I will share some of the metrics we identified for areas to track for improvement, lessons learned, and then what's next for our unit. All right, so in terms of background, the organization strategy and performance unit officially formed in fall of 2022. Prior to that, our team members were considered part of the Office of Financial Management's Director's Office, but we weren't formally our own unit. In the fall of 2022, our team was really focused on partnering with division directors, leaders, and employees within OFM to provide consulting services in a variety of areas, including equity, strategic planning, organization change management, process improvement, and non-IT project management. But we also helped with facilitation, the planning and hosting of all staff meetings, our agency mentorship program. And I think really, and probably this is similar to a lot of performance organizations within state government, really if folks reached out to us with anything related to those service offerings, we would help in any way that we can. So what led us to our customer feedback initiative is our unit had existed for about 6 months when we decided in spring of 2023 to hire a consultant to really help us understand the most valuable actions that we were performing in our current state, and to also identify activities for consideration in the future state. And ultimately, we really wanted to learn from our customers what had been helpful thus far in terms of the services that we've been providing and what changes we could make in the future to increase the value of our services. And this was really great timing because, as I mentioned, we were a relatively new unit and we hadn't formally sought feedback in a strategic and intentional manner since the creation of our unit. So just a really great opportunity to get some foundational input and then pivot as needed. So the goals of our work with the consultant are outlined on this slide. So the first goal was about defining project and change management, and more specifically discussing roles and responsibilities, deliverables, and outcomes. So this is really about establishing standardization and structure within the team to ensure that we all had a shared understanding of each of these items and that customers experienced consistency when interacting with us. Our second goal was about developing an organizational strategy by understanding perceptions of our customers and also the types of work requests that we were receiving, and really having the voice of our customers influence our path forward as a unit. We also were going to conduct a gap analysis to understand any gaps in our services as well as overlaps between the work conducted by our team and the services requested from our customers. And then our final goal was about determining organization and team structure. So by understanding the most valuable work, competencies required, and resources required. And this was really about learning how we should set ourselves up for long-term success. The consultant that we worked with led the gathering of customer feedback for this initiative, and customer feedback was gathered by the consultant primarily through one-on-one interviews with customers. And the customer groups that participated in one-on-one interviews included the OFM leadership team, which is comprised of the OFM director, the OFM deputy director, and division directors. And interviews were also held with what we would call strategic partners from across OFM divisions that our team worked with regularly, including supervisors and frontline employees. And the use of one-on-one interviews really supported both the use of open-ended questions and follow-up questions where needed, as well as psychological safety, because folks could provide honest feedback anonymously. And so some of the questions that folks were asked to answer included, what is your current understanding of the services provided by the organization strategy and performance unit? Which of the organization strategy and performance unit services have been most helpful for your division or unit and why? What challenges have you experienced, or what concerns do you have about your partnership with the organization strategy and performance unit? How might the organization strategy and performance unit increase the value of services offered? And those were, I think, the primary questions that were asked. So then what happened is the consultant compiled all of the data from the interviews that they completed and then provided us with an anonymous report outlining themes of the customer feedback received. And so I'm going to go through each of the customer feedback themes that we received. So the first theme was defining the role the organization strategy and performance unit plays within OFM. So we learned that customers wanted to understand the role of the organization strategy and performance unit within the larger OFM context. And folks were really wanting more clarity around the purpose of our unit and the answer to the question, what is the value proposition of this team? And then also we kind of learned from this that there was discrepancies in the familiarity with our unit amongst customers. As I mentioned previously, I talked a little bit about our service offerings. A piece of feedback that we received was about further defining those. So our customers wanted to understand the various service offerings that we provided, and we learned that many customers weren't familiar with all of the services that our unit provided, but were really familiar with the services provided by specific team members. So they, maybe knew that Aunna provides strategic planning and organization change management support, but weren't aware of all the collective services that our team provides as a whole. And as I'm going through these, I think a theme is really emerging among the feedback, which is really related to lack of awareness about our unit. And then the final theme on this slide is about designating a singular point of contact. So we heard from customers there was some frustration that there wasn't a consistent point of contact for engaging with our unit. So folks weren't sure if they should reach out to a specific consultant or if they should reach out to the director. So there was just a lack of understanding about how to discuss the partnership with our unit. The remaining customer feedback themes that we heard was around deciding how to delineate specialization on our team. So customers wanted to understand which consultant they would be partnered with, why, and what resourcing limitations may apply. And then also just ensuring that we're delivering high quality and consistent services. And then the final theme was about understanding clients in their work context, or excuse me, the second to last, understanding clients in their work context. So ensuring that as part of our work on initiatives and projects that we really embed ourselves within the team and understand, their work and the questions at play and the work context prior to making recommendations. And then the final theme was about executing effective project management and organization change management skills. So again, just ensuring that we're demonstrating effective project management and organization change management skills on all initiatives and projects that we're supporting. So I want to take a moment and share, a couple of the challenges I think that we encountered during this. We greatly appreciate and value the customer feedback we received. I think a challenge we encountered was actioning general feedback without an opportunity to ask clarifying questions. And this proved to be somewhat challenging because we really wanted to ensure that we were actioning feedback appropriately. And given some of the feedback was a little more general in nature, it would have been helpful to have the opportunity to ask clarifying questions. Having said that, we intentionally wanted to ensure that feedback could be given anonymously to create psychological safety for folks. And so we wouldn't change the approach that was taken, but I think that's just worth noting that was something that we worked through. A couple of the other challenges would be balancing our current workloads to action the feedback provided, and that also we didn't have a customer feedback framework established before we undertook this initiative. And what I mean by that is there wasn't an established and intentional process within our unit or the agency to regularly seek and action feedback from customers. And that's something we think could have been helpful prior to undertaking this project. In terms of successful outcomes, so some of the successful outcomes that occurred based on our customer feedback is we created a unit vision, mission, values, strategic priorities, and success measures that we are messaging to employees to clearly share our value proposition as a team. We've also worked to clearly define our service offerings, which are non-IT project management, strategic planning, process improvement, organization change management, and equity. And I think part of this is also being really clear about what's in scope and what's out of scope with each of these service offerings. And standardization has also been something we've been really focused on in terms of standardizing work, templates, and deliverables to ensure that we're providing high quality work products as well as a consistent experience for customers. And we've been working on templates that we've also shared with OFM employees that can be used as a resource by everybody if they so choose. And then another successful outcome is that our unit director established and participates in regular check-ins with our division directors to learn about what's occurring across our divisions and opportunities for our team to provide support, and then also to gather feedback about what's working well and any areas that we can adjust to improve. And as consultants, we also meet regularly with the sponsors and leaders of initiatives that we're supporting to request feedback more in real time. Additional successful outcomes would be related to adjusting our customer outreach approach. And so what I mean by this is I think really striving to take more of a proactive approach through check-ins as well as other means. So for example, we're hoping to launch some pulse surveys soon that we can share with folks to get more real-time feedback, and of course continuing with after action reviews and things of that nature after initiatives and projects are completed, but really striving to get feedback in real time so we can adjust in the moment and really ensure it's a value-added experience. We also are identifying core competencies for our work portfolio, so really focusing on the skill sets needed to effectively perform the service offerings our team provides, such as cultural humility. And then as individual consultants, we're also focused on upskilling and learning in our identified growth areas. So this also relates to some of the feedback related to specialization. So understanding the areas in which each of us specialize, and then also those areas where we have an opportunity for growth and some upskilling, whether that's organization change management, process improvement, etc. And then also I talked about this a little bit earlier, but sharing resources with our employees that align with our service offerings. So we've recently shared some continuous improvement templates that can be used for organization change management, non-IT project management, and process improvement, and really is an opportunity for folks to be able to use those templates and also partner with us for any coaching or mentoring. I think our overall success with this initiative was using customer feedback to make positive changes, such as establishing standard work products. And we are fully committed as a team to actioning and following through on the feedback we received and continuing to adjust as needed. And another great benefit of this work is being able to replicate the process that the consultant took us through with other teams within OFM as needed, and also using it as a starting point to create a customer feedback framework with an equity focus for OFM. And when I say framework, we're still kind of determining what that will be, but I think just in general, kind of thinking about it as some other frameworks that we use in organization change management and process improvement work, but having an intentional phased approach with a step-by-step process and supporting tools and resources. So more to come on that, but definitely something we're considering. All right, so these are metrics that are part of our team's 2023 through 2025 OFM strategic plan. The customer feedback we received did inform the development of these metrics, and the metric that we've been focusing on for the past few months is related to starting to use standardized templates. We released our templates to, sorry about that, we released our templates to OFM employees in January of 2024. And so that one is complete. And then we're really kind of in the initial phases for working on the other two metrics. So I mentioned earlier that one of the outcomes of this work included developing our vision, mission, values, and strategic priority statements, as well as success measures. So I just wanted to take a moment and share our unit's vision statement and mission statement. So our mission is we create human-centered strategic partnerships to build skills, foster a culture of belonging and operational excellence so that we can realize a vision of working together to empower one OFM. And our team identified several values, including collaboration, curiosity, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, empathy, support, and wellness. And then our strategic priorities are specifically promote and support diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, use customer-centric practices, and provide a consistent consultative experience. And so I think that there's really a direct tie between the feedback that we received, the actions we've taken as a result of the feedback, and then our strategic priorities. All right, so what's next? So before I talk about action items, I want to take a moment to share some lessons learned. So I think a few things that we would do differently going forward is to provide additional opportunities for folks to provide feedback, as well as more mechanisms to provide feedback. I think the one-on-one interviews were really helpful, and I think also ensuring that providing multiple ways for people to engage is also important. So maybe incorporating some surveys or some focus groups, things of that nature would certainly be a lessons learned. In addition, also seeking feedback from additional customer groups. We really focused on those we work most closely with, so executive leaders and then strategic partners within divisions, but certainly an opportunity to engage more customers. So that would be another opportunity for improvement. And then I think just always increasing connection points is important. So following the one-on-one interviews, we did hold kind of an information session with folks to share, this is what we heard, thank you for your feedback, and this is how we're actioning it. But I think there's always opportunities to increase engagement and follow through. And so just ensuring those connection points are in place to share how we're continuing to incorporate the feedback received. In terms of action items, so as I mentioned, just as team members continuing to grow and learn, and also regularly reassessing service offerings based on customer feedback. So if there's a need for us to really focus on providing equity as a service offering, for example, ensuring that that's at the top of our priority list. So continuing to gather that customer feedback to inform our work, and then also continuing to build deliverables and templates, both for our team use in the work that we do, but also as resources for all OFM employees. And with that, I think that's what I have for today. I just want to thank everyone again for listening to the presentation and for your time today, and we can open for questions.
Sorry, my mic was Thank you so much, Anna, for your presentation today. I love the fact that, you guys are just very proactive with just obtaining that real-time approach, and, that you used that customer feedback that you obtained to actually create metrics that you built into your strategic plan. That's really awesome. So thank you so much for sharing. It looks like we do have a question in the chat. Feel free if anyone else has anything to drop some in. We do have some time, but Jessica did ask, do you have a toolkit that you could share with us?
Yeah, so I think we can certainly share the templates that we've created thus far. I'll work with our internal IT team to open up the SharePoint, and then I can share that with Results Washington, and if you can distribute that to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Be happy to. And we do have something in the Q&A from Sam. Has your team explored the dynamic of empowering customers to define the outreach itself, like a customer-led steering committee? Also, are you compensating for outreach participation?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think in response to the first question, that isn't something we've explored to date, but I'll certainly take that back to my team. And I think in terms of customer outreach participation, I think that that's something that, we're continuing to work on and being more intentional in our approach.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Well, it looks like that is all I see right now, but like Megan, I'm sure Anna's virtual door is open, so feel free to reach out to her if you do have any questions or think of anything that comes to mind. But really appreciate Anna for just sharing about your project and just all the great work and growth that you guys are doing over there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.